Primetime Fantasy Football is brought to you by Next Level Radio. Head to nextlevelradioonline.com for past episodes of Primetime Fantasy Football and the Showcast, plus celebrity guest spotlight. Now on to this week's Primetime Fantasy Football.
People I never thought about associating with. I don't know what it is. Talk to me. Check it out. Hey, from the Vegas with a mansion on my land. Full jacuzzis and my neighbors can't stand the way I live. This zone so fast. Ain't got your ladies and prime time is on.
Whoa, Dion. It's not that kind of prime time.
Yeah, man, it's Primetime Fantasy Football on Next Level Radio.
Well, alright.
Welcome into the Week 11 version of Primetime Fantasy Football, brought to you by Next Level Radio. I am one of your three hosts, Adam Gorey, joined by Joe Webster and Steve Richards. How are you gentlemen doing tonight?
Good.
I'm wonderful, thank you.
We just wrapped up talking to Troy Rink of the Denver Post. We'll play that interview for you in just a little bit. Had some good insight on the Broncos running back situation. Obviously a hot topic, so we'll save that for the interview. Before we get started, I want to make sure you remember to check us out. Facebook.com/Next Level Radio Online. Twitter is at NXT Level Radio, and then you can check out past episodes. We've had a few beat writers from around the league, including the Lions, the Rams, and the Eagles. So you can go to nextlevelradioonline.com and then go to the Primetime Fantasy Football page. Or you can subscribe to us on iTunes. Just search for search for Primetime Fantasy Football. You can also search for Next Level Radio, where you will find the showcast and interviews with some celebrity guests from around the entertainment industry. Check Steve's blog out, StephenRichards.net, and you can follow him at srichards31. That's on Twitter. I am at AdamNextLevel, and Joe is at JoeyWeb32. Tweet us your questions, email us your questions, primetime at Next Level Radio Online. Let's start off like we usually do with high or low. Okay, first up, let's recap last week's results. I got two big old fat reds. I had Steve Smith. He only got me. Hey, you agreed with the Steve Smith pick, so I don't want to hear it. He got me 1.7 points. He's on a bye this week. No need to talk about him. Joe and I both got a red on Davante Adams. He had 1 point. They play the Eagles this week. I think last week was mainly just he didn't get involved in the offense. They used their two tight ends a lot. You saw them both get a touchdown each. Kind of taking away from Davante Adams. But they just got up so big, so fast. I mean, honestly, I'm surprised that Randall Cobb even had a touchdown after Jordy Nelson stole two. So are either of you shying away from Davante Adams at all? I mean, not as many buys this week, so does that affect your decision at all, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, in most leagues, he may be, if I'm strong at wide receiver, at best, he may be a flex. But even then, I think he's probably on most rosters a wide receiver 4. So I think one league I'm starting him because I have as my flex because I had Dez Bryant on a bye. But for the most part, I think he's still going to be a guy you want on your roster, but you're probably going to have him on the bench for the next week or so.
Yeah, I'd like to see how it pans out just because, this is a couple weeks in a row where he hasn't done as much. There was a lot of excitement about him, and it's certainly on the rise. So if you're in a dynasty league, he's more intriguing as like a stash type of player, but I don't know, like Joe said, with only a couple buys this week, I guess you could have Dez Bryant, or I'm not even sure who else is on bye this week, but you could have Dez Bryant or somebody else, and then maybe, but I wouldn't start him. If I had 4 options, he would probably be the 4th in most cases.
Yeah, and Steve, going on with what you just said about dynasty, even a keeper league, it may not be a bad idea because right now Randall Cobb is still looking for a contract, and he's playing for a contract, and I think he's playing himself that he's going to get paid wherever he goes, and I'm not sure if he's a free agent, but I know there was a lot of talk at the beginning of the year about a contract because that's when they signed Jordy Nelson. So if for some reason the Packers thought, well, Davante Adams is good and we don't have to pay him as much, and they let Randall Cobb walk, So he'll be a good guy if that were to happen. But even if he's not, the third wide receiver in an offense that passes all the time, he may be a guy to hold on to.
Yeah, and by the way, the buys this week are Dallas, New York Jets, Jacksonville, and Baltimore. So really,
Torrey Smith, maybe?
Yeah, Des Bryant, Torrey Smith are really the only big guys, or Steve Smith too. But you probably didn't draft Steve Smith to be a number 1 or 2 anyway. So, Steve, let's go on to how you did on your highs last week.
Sure. Well, I had Carson Palmer first, so he was disqualified because he tore his ACL. I guess we could. Do you want to talk about Drew Stanton and see if he's maybe a viable replacement for either one of you guys?
We can talk about it. I don't think that. I mean, you can pick him up as a flyer if you want. I'm not starting him this week, especially against the Lions. Maybe down the road if their schedule gets easier, which I don't even think that it does. They're in a tough division. So, I think there's other guys I'd rather have out there than Drew Stanton, like Mark Sanchez, who Joe hates.
No, I'll for the second week in a row, I'll admit when I was wrong, and it was on Mark Sanchez. So, I would definitely actually rather have Mark Sanchez. And the only reason I'd say no is because Drew Stanton has had at least, I believe it was 3 games that he was able to play in. And he didn't put up really great numbers. They won, I think, 2 of the games, but I don't think he's a guy that you really need to worry about with fantasy. There's plenty of other guys, even if you're streaming quarterbacks, that you can pick up and play week to week that are probably going to be better than Stanton.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's plenty of guys, like you said, to pick up and look at that are on the radar more than Drew Stanton.
Yeah, I think he played 3 games. He went for just over 6 points, 19 points, and then just over 4 points.
And I think one of those games, I think he got injured in.
Yeah, probably that. I think it was at 4.1, right?
Right.
And then my other guy I hit on, he scored 23 points, was Justin Forsett. I had 112 yards and 2 touchdowns, so that was a money ball for me. But like we said with Steve Smith and mentioned earlier, Baltimore is on a bye this week, so there is absolutely nothing else to talk about there.
I'm just going to give myself a 1/4 of a point for Justin Forsett because I gave the whole time of possession stat, and maybe that benefited Justin Forsett a little more than Steve Smith.
Yeah, way to go, bro.
1/4 point.
Nice job.
Joe, what about you?
We already mentioned my low. You and I both had Devontae Adams, but I hit on Terrence West last week. He had 26 attempts, so they gave him a ton of carries, 94 yards and a touchdown, so he scored just over 15 points. And he's got Houston this week, which I think he can actually do. I think he can actually be another viable running back this week in your lineup. It looks like he's going to get the share of the carries right now. And I still think it's kind of a mess in Cleveland, but I think he's going to get the first go at it. So depending on what your running back situation looks like, he could have another good week going forward. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I'll admit I was wrong. I didn't realize that the Browns were going to have all 3 of their running backs score a touchdown last week. And Terrence, I don't know if you saw the play.
I could have just named any one of them.
Yeah, he almost actually fumbled on the play that he scored. He basically threw it out of the back of the end zone, but it was after he already crossed the plane. But yeah, 26 attempts, that's what sticks out to me. So as long as they're feeding him the rock, he's a good runner. So as long as they're feeding him the rock, I can keep rolling with him.
I'll go the other way just to go the other way. I think Cleveland could be up for a letdown this week against Houston. They're at home, and they just came off a big win against Cincinnati, their first road win against the division in about 130 years. So they're on a huge high. I think it could just be, I don't know. I just think they're due for a letdown against Houston, and it could be ugly for Cleveland this week. But if it's not, then I'll be completely wrong. But I don't know that he'll be able to repeat that performance against Houston.
All right, well, let's go on to this week's pick and kind of piggybacking off Cincinnati. My first guy is Mark Ingram. He's playing the Bengals. Apparently, they're not that good against the run. They're fantasy point-wise, they're actually, I believe, a green. So I think they're top 10 giving up points to running backs now, which I don't know when that happened, but whatever. As long as it happened, I'm riding it. Plus, Ingram right now is, not to steal from Marshawn Lynch, but he's kind of beast mode right now. I mean, he's had 3 straight 100-plus games. They keep giving him the ball, so I'm going to keep him as an RB1. I love him this week. I just think they control the ball. they keep it going against the Bengals. Brandon LaFell's my second guy. He plays at the Colts. I think he's a legit number 2 wide receiver at this point on the Patriots, as long as they're slinging it. I looked at the over-under. It's approaching 60. If you're listening to this, it might already be 60, which means shootout. So, plus I play Tom Brady this week, which means he's going to sling it for probably like 30 points. So LaFell will probably at least catch a touchdown. Joe, we'll start with you. What do you think about Ingram and LaFell?
Love the Ingram pick. Not only with all of the facts and information you just gave. What's his name? Kyrie Robinson is actually sat out of practice today, and it looks like he's going to miss another week, which means Mark Ingram's going to get the lion's share of the carries by a lot. Even if he were playing, I think he'd still be the guy, but the fact that Robinson's out means just Ingram's going to get a lot more. So I love that pick. And LaFell, like you said, I love the stat with the over-under, the fact that they're predicting a shootout. And if it's going to be a shootout, you expect Gronk to get his. But LaFell has been one of Brady's favorite targets on the outside, so I'll go with that. I think they're 2 good picks. Steve?
Yeah, Ingram, I mean, he's one of the most pleasant surprises that you could have mid-season wise for fantasy if you own him. He is a running back 1, so I mean, even if the matchup was bad, you're probably going to play him because he's been so good for the last 3 weeks, like you mentioned, Adam, and it's a good matchup, so even better. He could be in for a top 5 running back type week this week. LaFell is good because of the matchup. There's going to be all sorts of points everywhere. The over-under is still, at least on the site that I use without condoning betting, is 58.5. So it's still under 60, but if it's 58.5, that's a whole lot of points. So it's definitely the highest over-under for the week, and it's the highest over-under for the week by about a touchdown. So there's going to be a lot of points in that game. It'll be fun to watch, and Brandon LaFell is going to be doing something because he's pretty much the go-to as far as wide receivers go. Obviously, the go-to receiver is Gronk, but in the wide receiving core, he seems to have surpassed Edelman, so that's a good pick.
Yeah, I go LaFell over who we were talking about earlier. I'd go LaFell over Adams at this point for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Absolutely. He's a hot hand. As far as who I have this week for my high, I start with Ryan Matthews, who is on the way back this week on schedule to play. Said he feels good, feels fast. They're playing Oakland, so I'm going to go ahead and fire him up right away, despite what the coaches say. They said they're going to ease him back in, but I think he just has a chance to make an impact right away. It's a perfect matchup, really, to get him work in a game that they need to win, and they better win, and I think they're going to be ahead early and have plenty of chances to do some running. He's coming off a bye, or they're coming off a bye, like I said, but Ryan Matthews had a 9-week bye or something like that, so he's fully healthy and he's fast, so I think he's going to be a good matchup this week. My other guy is the quarterback out of Atlanta, Matt Ryan. They're playing at Carolina, and any team that can give up 300 yards and 2 touchdowns to Mark Sanchez is okay with me. They stink against the pass. Then they're much worse in their secondary than their front 7, and they're bad against the run because they're so bad against the pass. It kind of sets it all up, the classic there. It's a good matchup. He's a bye week replacement, or if you had Carson Palmer starting, I think he's a solid Carson Palmer replacement, certainly for this week. So where are you guys at? We'll start with Adam with Ryan Matthews and Matt Ryan.
I'm going to agree with Ryan Matthews only because of how I just think they've been saying it that he's going to go right back in the number 1 role, and I think that's because you saw Brandon Oliver kind of struggled down the last few games, and they've lost the last few games, so they probably draw a little bit of a connection there. So I think they get him at least like 15 to 20 touches, maybe not necessarily all carries, but at least touches. So I like that pick. I'm going to go the other way on Matt Ryan only because with him, it's a guessing game for me. He hasn't had over 20 fantasy points in a standard league since week 4. Had a great matchup against Tampa Bay last week and kind of only got, I think, like 15 or 16 points. Somehow, both Atlanta and Carolina are only a game out of the division.
If Carolina won Monday night, they'd be winning. They'd be leading the division.
Yeah, so I mean, they both have something to play for, but I think Carolina, this is a show me week for them. It's at home on Monday night. I just think if there's any time for their defense to show up, it'd be tonight, I should say Monday night. So I just don't know if I can trust Matt Ryan. So, if I have another option, I'll go with it. If he's my only option, I'm feeling a little comfortable. But after seeing him only put 15 points up last week against the Bucks, I'm not sure. Especially considering he put up 30 points against them, in 3 quarters at the beginning of the year.
I agree with the Ryan Matthews pick. Just because they're playing Oakland, to be honest with you. I think that is, you said it right. It's the perfect matchup to come back to. So I think he could have a big day. And I'm going to agree with actually Adam on the Matt Ryan. I am a Matt Ryan owner, and unfortunately, he's just been so unpredictable. And you brought up the exact point. I honestly don't remember who just said it, but the fact that he had such a good matchup last week versus Tampa Bay,
that'd be me,
and wasn't able to capitalize. I hope you're right. Everything you said about the Carolina defense being bad is correct, and he should, especially after what we saw Mark Sanchez do. But it wouldn't completely shock me as a frustrated Matt Ryan owner if he's just average at best again. So I'll go that way, and I hope that I'm wrong on that. My highs this week, I'm going to go with a guy I've been high on several times. I think I've only hit once, but I'm going to hopefully go for 2. Is Jeremy Hill versus New Orleans. Gio Bernard did not practice again today. And a couple reports that I've read said that it could be a little bit bigger of an injury than people first thought. A lot of people thought he would be back this week. And as people have been talking about it more and more, it sounds like it could be another week or so. I think he was embarrassed about the play on Thursday night that the Cincinnati Bengals had, and I think that he'll get back on track against New Orleans. And then the other one is John Brown, the rookie wide receiver out of Arizona against Detroit. It looks like him and Drew Stanton have a chemistry together. Last week he was targeted 9 times, which was second on the team only to Fitzgerald, who had 10. Detroit is a really tough team to run on, so I think Stanton's going to have to throw. I think they're going to probably stack the box against Ellington, which I'll be talking about a little bit later. And I think if they're going to be throwing a lot, Brown could benefit. And part of me is picking him just because I'm really hoping to see him do his touchdown celebration again.
That was cool.
That was awesome. So, Steve, where are you at on these 2 guys?
I do like the John Brown pick. I'm excited about that. I think that's I thought about putting Ellington on a low list, and I thought about putting John Brown on a high list. So I do think that the strategy will be to throw, not run against Detroit. So I think for everything you said, plus the tough run defense, like you said, John Brown is a good pick. And then Jeremy Hill, I don't know. I guess it depends on what's up with Gio Bernard, because as soon as Gio Bernard's healthy, he's the starter. I mean, they're not going to put Jeremy Hill in front of Gio Bernard. So as soon as he's healthy, he's going to play. But if he doesn't play, then Jeremy Hill certainly has a lot of potential against New Orleans. So I don't mind that pick. I guess it just depends on the injuries for me. Where are you at, Adam?
Yeah, with Jeremy Hill, it's like Steve said, if Gio comes back, then no, I don't like it, but I don't think Gio's going to end up playing this week, so I like it. You saw them have the Bengals looked absolutely terrible all around against the Browns last week. They got a nice 10 days to think about it, sort it out, and I think Jeremy Hill's going to bounce back as long as he is the starter, like Steve said, and there is a report coming out that he's not going to play this week, so... That's Gio Bernard, by the way. So John Brown, I'm going to disagree with this week. I like him.
Well, you have him on a list.
Yeah, I like him long term, but I'll go into that a little bit later on, and we can talk a little bit about the other wide receiver, Michael Floyd, when we recap last week's 0 to hero that Joe flopped on. So let's move on to the low lists, the Week 10 results from the low list. I'll start off with a yellow with Drew Brees. He got 20 points because he got that damn third touchdown for just the second time this year. If he would have stuck to 2, I would have been in the green. But he also
if he didn't fumble away the game, he would have had 22 points.
He also lost that fumble, to give the Niners an easy win. I also had Trey May. He plays the Bengals this week, so I guess we'll talk about Drew Brees. Is there really much to talk about? I guess like I said last week, you're not benching him. You're not benching him this week. Bengals are an okay matchup, but he's like I said, he's not as high. I don't think he's like a top 5. If he is a top 5 quarterback the rest of the season, he's just in the top 5. But I have guys like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, probably a couple other Andrew Luck ahead of him. How do you guys feel against him, Cincinnati? Any issues there between either of you, Joe?
No, obviously, if he's your starter, you're going with him.
Yep. Run out Drew Brees if you have him. There's no real debate. It's just how many points he'll score. That's why we had a different gauge kind of thing on when you had him on a low list last week.
Right, so damn close. Trey Mason is my next guy. 8.1 points last week. He had 14 attempts for 48 yards. He actually caught 4 catches. Obviously he caught 4 catches. 4 balls for 53 yards. I didn't expect him to get that many points through the air, so that actually kind of boosted him more than I thought. Still got the green because he was under the 10-point margin. Cunningham also actually had a couple more points than him, which I said I thought Cunningham would have a better game, and he did, but not by much, so I can't really toot my own horn there. But they play the Broncos this week, and I guess we can kind of save it a little bit because we do briefly discuss the Rams during the interview with Troy Rink. But he kind of led to it, but teams get away from running the ball. So do either of you like any of the running backs this week on the Rams?
God, no.
No.
Okay.
That's going to be my answer for the rest of the season, by the way.
All right, so Steve, let's go on with your lows from last week.
Sure, yeah, I hit on both actually. First one was Le'Veon Bell out in Pittsburgh. Like we said last week, you probably started him if you had him, but I just had a bad feeling. He had scored 6.9 points, 36 yards rushing, 33 yards receiving, no touchdowns or anything like that. This week they are at Tennessee. That's the Monday night game this week. Pittsburgh at Tennessee. So what do you guys see on a Monday night on the road again for Le'Veon Bell?
I like him. Justin Forsett, you saw what he did last week. I think Le'Veon Bell can kind of mirror that a little bit. And like I said last week, he's involved a lot in the pass game. You saw it last week, 8 receptions, only 33 yards. But if you're in a PPR league, I mean, he still ended up getting you almost 15 points, which isn't bad. So I just think he's that dual threat. He almost had as many catches as he did rush attempts. So I think he has more rush attempts this week. Probably a few less catches, but I think he puts up more yards.
Yeah, I agree. I think the last 2 weeks, Tennessee faced Arian Foster, who put up 151 rushing yards. Last week, Forsett 112. I think Bell's probably a lock to go over 100 yards this week.
Oh. Yeah, I think he's a great bounce back candidate. So
lock it in. By the way, if you told me that Le'Veon Bell would have less points than Andre Williams, I would have called you crazy.
Yeah, I almost didn't hit on Andre Williams, who was my second low. He ended up with 9.8, so I got him by 0.2 of a point. Didn't do well with the rushing yards. I had less than Le'Veon Bell, actually, but scored a touchdown and then added 5 yards receiving for whatever that's worth. This week, they have San Francisco at home. So what do you guys think about Andre Williams moving forward this week? I believe Jennings is back this week as well, so what do you think?
He is. He's on one of my lists, and Andre Williams, you can go right back to the bench, my friend.
Yeah, we'll talk.
He's been bad.
We have a segment coming up that we'll talk about him on, so I'll save my opinion on Andre Williams for that.
That's fair. So we'll move right into Joe. Go for it.
Well, I was really bad on both of my low picks, so if you listened to me last week, I apologize. The one I was very confident in was Odell Beckham.
I think I disagreed with you on both, so I'm just gonna throw that out.
Good, good for you. That's good on you.
Good for you.
You did actually disagree. I remember that now because I had Odell Beckham against Seattle, and I was just sure a rookie against Seattle was going to really struggle, and he really did well. Had 7 receptions, 108 yards. Didn't score, but those 108 yards were really good. And even the Seahawks secondary had some really good things to say about him. And I just think back to the preseason when I was putting out I was in charge of doing the wide receiver rankings of all the rookies. And obviously because Beckham wasn't practicing at all, I had him way down, and I expected very little of him this year because of all of the hype that was around Benjamin and Watkins, and even us being from Phillies, Jordan Matthews. And I just thought Beckham would fall away. And at this point, Beckham may be the rookie that you want the most out of this entire class going for the rest of the season.
Oh, I think that's true. And it's also the Giants were impotent in the preseason.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, all the rookie wide receivers this year have done a great job. I mean, we've talked before about rookie wide receivers struggling. Many of them this year have done very well for themselves in their first year.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't think he'll be on any more of my low list. I think I think he's becoming a really good target for Eli Manning. So, and the other one is I had Jamal Charles, and I said I know that everybody's going to start him, and I knew he would do okay. I said probably expect more of running back 2 or flex numbers, which still isn't bad. But he well exceeded that. He was running back number 1 or he wasn't the number 1, but he was an RB1. Had 17 points, just over almost 18 points, 98 yards and a touchdown, a couple of receptions for 20 yards. So I was definitely wrong on that. He plays Seattle this week, which is going to be a tough matchup, but I am not going to tell you to sit him.
Speaking of the number one running back when you talk about Seattle.
Yeah, how about it? Marshawn Lynch. So that's going to be a great matchup between 2 great running backs. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. And, Andy Reid against Pete Carroll could be a fun matchup.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think points could be hard to come by, but.
All right, well, let's move on to this week's picks for our low lists. I have Keenan Allen. Both of my picks, by the way, Steve's not going to like, so I can tell you that right now. I have Keenan Allen versus Oakland. You'd think that's a great matchup. You'd be wrong. Oakland actually giving up right now the 7th least fantasy points to wide receivers, and that includes that big game last week against Denver. So I'm not quite on board the Keenan Allen train yet, as far as him being quote unquote back and good to plug into your fantasy football team. I'm still got him maybe like a wide receiver 3 this week, high end wide receiver 3, low end 2 maybe. My next guy is Mr. Russ Wilson. He's playing at KC, which we kind of just briefly touched on the Jamal Charles, Marshawn Lynch thing. But I think this week he gets a taste of his own medicine in Kansas City. That's a tough place to play, much like Seattle. Looking at the spread as well, it was initially a pick'em. KC's now a 1.5 point favorite. I think Kansas City could win this by more than that, maybe 3 to 7, even more points. I think it's going to be a down day for Russell Wilson and the boys. Maybe even Marshawn Lynch coming back to earth a little bit. So, Joe, we'll start with you because we probably don't need to talk too much about what Steve thinks of these two because I think I already know the answer. But, Joe, we'll start with you. What do you think of Keenan Allen and Russ Wilson?
I agree with Keenan Allen. As a Keenan Allen owner, I've been frustrated with him all year. And even if you told me he was playing a Pee-wee team this week, I'd probably agree with you on a low list. I'm kind of just waiting for him to do something before I trust him. But you drafted him pretty high. Chances are you may have to be starting him still, but I agree with that. Russell Wilson, I'm not so sure if I agree with that. I think Kansas City is a tough place to play. I agree with that, but I just think that he's just going to be doing something with his legs, his arms. He can do it all. So I actually kind of like him this week at Kansas City. So, Steve, what do you think?
Oh, first of all, I think Adam's an idiot.
Is that relating to fantasy football, or is that just in general?
Not particularly. It's just an in general statement.
Okay. You'd be right.
Keenan Allen, I don't know. It's just the way it is. Once that guy starts scoring touchdowns, he's going to be a vital asset. I still think he's a prime buy low candidate for a stretch run. I think he could be a huge asset to a team looking to make a move in the last couple of weeks and into the playoffs, just because his numbers just don't make sense with the amount of touchdowns he hasn't caught compared to the amount of catches he has. So I think that it's coming eventually. And Oakland, like you said, is a good matchup. So disagree there. And you're a real jerk for putting Russell Wilson on a low list. He actually, but Joe kind of alluded to it. He's rushed for over 100 yards 3 times this year. He threw for 172 and 2 picks last week and got me 22 points because he rushed for 110 yards and a touchdown. So I just think, I don't know, it's tough to put Russell Wilson on a low list just because of the running threat like Joe alluded to, but it is a tough matchup. So to be in all seriousness, it is definitely a tough matchup in Kansas City, and I could see Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch both struggling. And I do think Kansas City is going to win that game. So as far as real life football, I think that's a good pick as well. For my lows, I fit 3 into 1 with my first one. I just put a Lions running back. They're playing Arizona this week. Their backfield is just a mess. If you're talking Lions running backs at this moment, Joique Bell is probably the guy that you're talking about most relevantly. But I wouldn't start him either this week. Arizona is just fierce at home. If you watch that game against St. Louis last week, they went off in the fourth quarter. And it was actually a lot of fun to watch. But they're especially dangerous against the run. And then Bush and Theo Riddick are your other 2 guys, and that's a complete crapshoot. Reggie Bush gets hurt every 3rd touch. And Theo Riddick could score a game-winning touchdown, but he's not too much of an impact player. For me right now, at least, you might handcuff Bush with Riddick, but you can't trust either one of them really. I would expect Detroit's attack this week to be through the air, much like I expect Arizona's attack to be through the air this week. My second guy is Martavis Bryant. Again, they play Tennessee on Monday night. I think this train has to slow down eventually. It's just a ridiculous, unsustainable, much like the bizarro Keenan Allen. He just catches a ton of touchdowns for how many catches he has. He was saved last week by a garbage 80-yard touchdown. He would go for 6.3 last week without it, but he didn't. So he got a 14-point play and scored 20.3. So the numbers look good, but he was really saved late by an 80-yard touchdown. I think this week on the road on Monday night, I think Tennessee doesn't have anything to play for but pride, and they're in front of a national audience. So I think they're going to play. They're going to play well in defense for me, they're better at stopping the pass than the run. If they're going to stop anything, it'll be the pass. So that hurts Martavis Bryant for me. Where are you guys at? And we will start with Adam, so Joe can go and roll into his lows. Where are you at, Adam?
I'm going to agree.
With Lions running backs and Martavis.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with both. Just a bad matchup for the Lions running back. Like you said, Drake Bell's probably the guy you would want out of the whole backfield. But just not a good matchup for him. I guess, you probably have to roll with him. But you're not, expecting much from him. And Martavis Bryant, I agree. Mainly because I'm pretty sure he only played about half of the snaps. And that 80-yard touchdown in garbage time, like you said, essentially saved his week. So, he is catching touchdowns and everything like that. He's a guy that I would like to have on my team. But until he starts playing some more snaps, I'm not necessarily starting him if I don't have to. If you have Dez Bryant on the bye and, he's... Martavis Bryant's normally your third or fourth guy, and you have to put him in. I could see him getting 7, 8 points, and then maybe a touchdown and getting 13 points, but just not somebody I can rely on.
You guys both said it all with the Lions running backs, and I agree with it, so I'm not going to elaborate any more on that. And I think a couple weeks ago I promised that I would never speak ill of Martavis Bryant since I was so against him at one point, and he's just blown up since. So I'm going to disagree just on the fact that he has proven me so wrong, and I think if you got him, keep putting him out there until he proves you wrong. So I'll disagree with you guys on that one. I'll go right into my lows. I have Andre Ellington. It hurt to put this guy on there because during the preseason, he's probably the running back I spoke of the most. But Detroit's got a really good run defense, and now that they've got Stanton at quarterback, I really just think that the Lions, who are already so good against the run, they're just going to stack as many as they can in the box and force Stanton to throw. The good news, I guess, with that is that Ellington is one of the better pass-catching backs in the league, so even if he only has maybe 30 yards rushing, he could still turn in 60, 70 yards receiving. So it could come to bite me in the end there. He could maybe total over 100 yards because of his receiving, but I'm going to still put him on the low list this week. And the next guy I have on my low list, not because I wasn't proven wrong last week, but I did put Mark Sanchez on my low list because when I did some research on this, the Packers have only allowed one quarterback, and that's Drew Brees, to pass for over 300 yards this season. And I was really surprised by that because I know the Packers aren't known for a great defense, but their rush defense is actually one of the worst. I think they were the worst rush defense up until about last week or so. So they're in they're 27th, 28th, 29th, somewhere in that range now. And so I'm really thinking the Eagles are going to have to try to rely on the run. I think I said the exact same thing last week, and I couldn't have been more wrong. So I figured 2 weeks in a row I got to be right one of these weeks. So Andre Ellington, Mark Sanchez. Adam, where are you at on these two guys?
Well, with Mark Sanchez, law of probability might say you're right, but I'm going to have to disagree and say you're wrong because, I think they probably do try and get the run game going a little bit, but that opens up the pass game for them, in my opinion. And getting those running backs involved in the pass game helps as well. But I just think, Matt, he had 22 points last week, I think over 22 points, and Macklin didn't even have a good game. He had a quiet game. I mean, it was all with Jordan Matthews. So I think, with Jordan Matthews opening things up and maybe Jeremy Macklin getting involved a little more, I think you can see Mark Sanchez put up, what are we calling a low from Mark Sanchez, like under 18?
Yeah, I'd probably say that, under 18.
I think he gets in that 18 to 20 point range. So I think you might earn yourself a yellow if I had to
Yeah,
to
I
guess
think
on
he
him.
could be close to that, yeah.
So Andre Ellington, you kind of said it. I mean, I'm not expecting much from him, but he is their go-to guy, and like you said, he could end up totaling over 100 yards just completely. So I think you might earn yourself 2 yellows here. I think he could get maybe like 9-10 points in that range. So I'm like not agreeing, but I'm not disagreeing. I think you just might get yourself a couple of yellows. Steve?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it a little bit earlier as in regards to Andre Ellington. I think the Cardinals, their approach is going to be to pass rather than run for a lot of reasons, and you pretty much said all the reasons. But what triggered in my mind as you were talking was if you're in a PPR league, Ellington is probably still a viable play, but not if you're in a standard league. So I think there's definitely a distinction there, especially this week for Andre Ellington. But I think in a standard league, it's a good low pick. Sanchez, I'm going to agree with you as well, just because it's really unreliable at this point. The Packers are really good right now. And I don't really have any idea. He could have a ton of garbage points if it turns into a blowout. He could play really well, or he could play really poorly. So I really could see it going any which direction. So I'm not going to completely disagree with you. Maybe not completely agree with you, just because I'm not really sure what Sanchez will do. But also butt fumble, because I think it's mandatory to say butt fumble when you talk about Mark Sanchez.
Yeah.
And by the way,
can we get rid of forever, maybe?
I picked Sanchez up as a bye week fill-in for Phillip Rivers, and if you did something similar like that or picked him up, just to have a guy, I think Tom Brady was on a bye last week, Andrew Luck. So if you picked him up there, and you're secure at your number one quarterback position, I would sell high on him this week before he does have a game like, not butt fumble maybe, but before he does put up like 14 or 15 points in a bad game.
I agree. Actually, I completely agree with that, because he's probably hot. And if he has another good week this week, that just increases his value. But yeah, if you already have a number one, definitely go in and sell high on Sanchez.
All right, well, stick around, because in just about a minute, we will play for you our interview with Troy Rink, the Broncos beat writer for the Denver Post.
Hey everybody, Ben Beck from Next Level, inviting you to join myself and Adam Gorey every Sunday for another episode of The Showcast. We bring you the best stories in pop culture, the newest stories in film and television, as well as movie reviews, what's going to be released in DVD, as well as coming to the box office for the weekend, and much, much more. All you have to do is search Next Level Radio under the iTunes Store and subscribe, or simply go to our website, www.nextlevelradioonline.com, and you can find our current shows as well as all of our past shows right there on the website. So we hope you join us every Sunday for another new episode of The Showcast.
Hey all, this is David Hoffman from NBC's Crossbones, and you are listening to Next Level Radio. Have fun.
Thanks for listening to Primetime Fantasy Football. Send your questions in to primetime@nextlevelradioonline.com. primetime@nextlevelradioonline.com. And make sure to check out our weekly rankings, nextlevelradioonline.com, and go to the Primetime Fantasy Football tab. We'll post the link on Twitter and Facebook at NXT Level Radio or facebook.com/nextlevelradioonline.
All right, and we are back here on Primetime Fantasy Football, presented by Next Level Radio, and we are joined by a special guest this week. We'd like to welcome to the podcast Troy Renck, the Broncos beat writer for the Denver Post. Troy, how you doing tonight?
Great, guys. How are you?
Very good. Let's get right into things for you. Then we'll let you get going. I'm sure you're very busy this time of year. But first off, there have been some varying reports on Ronnie Hillman this week. Initially, some were saying day to day, and then 1 to 2 weeks. Some saying at least 2 to 3. It seems like that might be the case. What are you hearing about Ronnie Hillman?
Yeah, it's probably leaning more to that 2 to 4 week time period. Mid-foot sprain. Champ Bailey dealt with one of those last year, and every case is different. But Bailey missed significant time. So the idea you'd see Ronnie Hillman before 3 weeks is probably overly optimistic. Again, it could change, but at the very minimum, he's going to miss a couple of weeks. And they're going to take precaution because Montee Ball's back. I mean, it's just the way it's worked out with their timing, that as soon as Hillman went down, Montee Ball will be ready to play this week against St. Louis in his hometown. So they'll have T.J. Anderson and Montee Ball. So as you stand right now, there'd be no reason to rush Hillman back.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, with the return of Monte Ball and the good performance of C.J. Anderson last week, how do you expect the carries to work out this week against the Rams? I mean, there are reports that Monte Ball, you know, is down 12 pounds in weight and looked good in practice. Do you think they could try and work him right back into it? Maybe ease him in a 50-50 split? You know, how do you see the carries breaking down this week?
Well, it's been a weird situation all year. We expect C.J. Anderson to start, so he'd be their third starter in 10 games. Ball had the job, was ineffective, then got hurt. Hellman took over, and then Anderson had a breakout game last week against Oakland. So the expectation is C.J. Anderson would start. Monte Ball will get some work, though. That's part of their regular rotation. And then they've made it very clear, at least so far, they're going to play the hot hand. Just as C.J. Anderson got hot last week against Oakland, he got the brunt of the work, both in the passing and running game. But if Monte Ball breaks off a few runs, he is lighter. He's down from 224 to 212, his old college weight, which I think will help him with his line, because these holes open and close quickly, and the bigger version of Monte Ball was not working earlier in the season. But they're going to play the hot hand in these games, but I would expect C.J. Anderson to get the first look. He's earned that, and he deserves that based on how he played against Oakland.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, with Hillman and, you know, Ball and Anderson, when Hillman gets healthy, do you think they give him that starting role back, or does it depend how Ball and Anderson do? I mean, it's kind of like a revolving door, it feels like. Do you know what might happen when Hillman comes back healthy in a few weeks?
Well, there's no guarantee he would get the job back, just as there's no guarantee that Ball would get it back. And even Monte admitted that. Modern-day NFL, it's about production. And outside of a superstar coming back off injury, none of these players are superstars. So the player who's doing well is getting the opportunity to start. In this case, it appears to be at least C.J. Anderson. The other thing you always have to understand in Denver specifically is if a running back struggles in pass protection with Peyton Manning, it doesn't matter how he's running, he will lose playing time. Number one priority of any running back in the Broncos offense is pass protection. C.J. Anderson got on the field against New England because he improved in pass protection over the last few weeks. If for some reason he struggles against blitz schemes, you'll see Monte Ball, no matter how C.J. Anderson's running. So that's always the caveat I tell people on this, but watch how they do in pass protection, not just how they run the ball, because that determines as much of their playing time as anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, you know, Peyton Manning and pass protection. That's kind of how this offense goes, and we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Peyton Manning in the passing game. Obviously, Peyton does a great job of spreading the ball around, with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders both on pace for better than 110 catches this year, and Julius Thomas on pace for a ridiculous 21 touchdowns. They spread it around pretty good. I guess fantasy-wise, would there be any way for owners of receivers for the Broncos to get a gauge on who might have a big day going into Sunday, maybe due to the matchup or how they look in practice that week, or maybe just flipping a coin, anything to give an indication?
Well, the one consistent guy is Demaryius Thomas. He's going to get his. He struggled the first couple of weeks only because of his own drop. You know, since the third game of the season, after those first 3 games, he has been an absolute monster, as you guys know. He gets his because they use him on screens. They use him on against coverage. They throw to open with him, meaning even if he has great coverage, they're still going to throw to him. Emmanuel Sanders, his is a little different because he gets a lot of his yards in big chunks. So I don't want to say Deshaun Jackson because he's not that, but he's comfortable working in the slot underneath routes, but he gets his big yardage over the top. And so sometimes that can go away, but they have found ways. Peyton Manning loves this new toy. He has never played with a guy. I guess you could say maybe Marvin Harrison. He hasn't played with a guy in nearly a decade as quick as Emmanuel Sanders. Mm-hmm. Julius Thomas does become a matchup thing. If the team decides to take him out of the game, they can. They can bracket him. They can double team him. He's a great player, and he still can be a mismatch, but you can double team him, take him out. You can't really take out Demaryius Thomas out of a game. He's so fast, he's so big, he's so strong that he could get 150 yards every game if you just threw to him almost exclusively. The one guy that comes and goes is Wes Welker, who's become almost like a left-handed specialist in baseball. He's just used mainly for third downs, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. He's going to convert 2 or 3 of those a game, but his stats are 4 catches, 45 yards. The days of him having big yardage are probably over in this offense.
Absolutely, yeah. Troy Rink joining us, Broncos beat writer for the Denver Post. And Troy, Shaun Hill is starting this week for the Rams. That actually came out today. We're recording here on Wednesday. Denver is mediocre against the pass statistically, but that's probably just because they're ahead all the time and beating people early. Does the quarterback change for the Rams affect how the defense might approach Sunday? Maybe they'll be more aggressive, less aggressive. Is there any indication there on the quarterback change?
Yeah, they don't tip their hand, but traditionally when you put a veteran in, they're a little less blitz happy. If Austin Davis had stayed in, they were going to be, the dogs are unleashed, release the hounds. They'd go after him. And Denver has the advantage. They're the number one ranked rush defense. And they have two of the best defensive ends, or rush ends, however you classify it, in Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware. So they have different ways to attack teams. But with Sean Hill in there, I would expect that they're going to be a little less aggressive in their schemes, maybe play a little more zone than they would have maybe gone just straight man against Davis, forced him to make decisions against pressure. But I would expect them to play well in this game. This is they coming off a Raiders game where they absolutely dominated. And yes, it's the Raiders, and Derek Carr refuses to take a sack. So the statistics are crazy in the way they dominated them. But with Sean Hill in instead of Davis, the Rams will take care of the ball better. I'm sure of that. And in the one change in Denver's defense, we would expect, again, Jack Del Rio loves doing crazy stuff sometimes, but we'd expect they would blitz less and kind of ease into the game rather than just release the hounds on the quarterback.
Absolutely.
Anybody on the Rams that you think might have a decent week? I know their running back situation's a little hairy as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to, where they've struggled against guys, running backs out of the backfield give them problems at times. And big tight ends, Gronkowski and Antonio Gates killed the Broncos, but the Rams don't have that kind of tight end. He's good, but they don't have that guy. But they will give up passing yards, as you guys alluded to, because they're usually ahead, 14-0, 10-3, 14-3, and so teams give up on the run rather quickly. Almost by the first half, Niners, Jets, Cardinals, I can go down the list of games have covered where the teams just abandon the run, and they go in, so their quarterback ends up with 55 attempts. So they'll have at least one of their receivers that might go over 100 yards because they end up throwing it 45 times, 50 times. But the one receivers that's given them problems are the big tight ends. I mean, Antonio Gates and Gronkowski absolutely destroyed the Broncos.
Well, Troy, getting back a little bit to the running game, one of the questions that I had for you kind of answered already, but I wanted to kind of bring up the fact that the Broncos, it looks like they brought in free agent offensive lineman Richie Incognito for a workout this week. And reports were that everything went well, but they're not ready to sign him yet. So I think that's obviously an indication of, maybe the offensive line having some concerns there. So I just was kind of wondering what you thought about them bringing him in, and do you think it could help their running game, which is currently ranked, the Broncos' run game currently ranked 26th in the NFL?
Yeah, they're never going to be a great running team as long as Peyton Manning's here. I mean, that's one thing everyone wants balance. They're not going to be top 10 running team when he's here. They pass. Their running game is his short passing. But to your point, the right tackle position has been a revolving door. Chris Clark struggled, got benched. Paul Kornick struggled. He was getting benched, then got hurt. And it speaks to the number of changes. They put Will Montgomery at center, moved the center Ramirez to right guard, moved the right guard Vasquez, an all-pro last year, to right tackle. He's not going to be an all-pro right tackle with 8 games left. So he's really wearing it in the situation. The Incognito thing, they wanted some veteran. They want a veteran backup. Ben Garland, who's been trying for 5 years to get on the field, an Air Force guy, a wonderful story, he would be their backup guard with Ramirez and Montgomery both on the field. So they'd be looking for a veteran backup. Personally, I don't think it's worth it to bring Incognito in just because of the publicity. There's got to be someone similar. I mean, it's not just last year with Jonathan Martin. His transgressions go all the way back to Nebraska. He has been an inside the locker room problem. Take out the stuff that happens outside the locker room. Inside the locker room have been his worst problems, and it just feels like that would be a sell your soul move for the Super Bowl. And there just gets to a point where you draw the line in the sand and you want to win, but sometimes you'd rather lose and sleep well at night than win with certain guys. Richie Incognito would not be on my team, but I don't make the decision. I know why they would do it. I just say he would not be on my team as a backup. It's just not worth it. And I saw the Broncos when I covered them 14 years ago down this path with Dale Gardner, Dale Carter, Travis Henry. You keep bringing in enough of these bad guys, and then you have a bad locker room. And then you have bad guys and a bad team. I just don't think it's worth it in Incognito. If you're going to bring in a skill guy, a quarterback, then you can create an argument for it, and I still wouldn't do it. But to bring in a backup lineman that's like bringing in a bench player in baseball. Like it'd be like bringing Jose Canseco in to be a pinch hitter. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe the thought behind it is the fact that, it's pretty obvious who the leader of that team is with Peyton Manning. So I wonder if they kind of just figured, Manning will have a control on this, and everybody knows it's his team, and maybe he'll be able to keep things in line there.
Well, there's no question they have leaders in Terrence Knight and DeMarcus Ware and Peyton Manning. And I asked Terrence Knight today, and he said, he'd have to adjust to our locker room. We wouldn't, as soon as he got here, we wouldn't anticipate any problems because of what we're trying to accomplish here, what's at stake, and he would have to adjust us. And all that's saying the right thing. It's just his history is such that I don't know how you would trust Incognito not to do something stupid because he has over and over and over. And
right.
We're bringing him in to start, and he was this major piece of something. You start creating the argument that he's worth it. He just doesn't seem worth it. It's just a lot of bad publicity for a backup. But I wouldn't be surprised if they sign him in a couple of weeks. They left the door open to this possibility because they are really concerned about their offensive line. And they're the poker player now where they're all in. So there is this sense, they'll never say it, but kind of a sense of desperation. We're all in on our chips, and we don't want this one position of right tackle to cost us the Super Bowl. So how can we fix this? So that's, right. Even though Incognito's a guard, but if he fixes the line, I know they would rationalize it. It's football. I get it. Absolutely. It's NFL. So I'm just saying I wouldn't do it. It wouldn't be worth it to me personally. Given everything I've read about Incognito, I wouldn't do it.
Okay. And then the last question we have for you tonight, it may be one of the more important questions you get this week. We're wondering if you think Brock Osweiler is actually going to get a chance to get into the game this week.
I would doubt it on the road against the Rams. They generally play pretty good defense. And if he does, I hope he's ready and his helmet's next to him. I read he waits for it, and then he gets punched, waiting to get in.
I read your article on it this week, and he sounded like he had a pretty good attitude about it.
Yeah, he has to. He's lucky he ever plays. There's guys that are back at Peyton Manning in seasons that have not played a snap. So right. Honestly, the fact, go back to the Super Bowl. Peyton Manning played every snap of the Super Bowl. If there was ever a game to come out of it, it was the fourth quarter of that game. So Brock knows his chances are limited. I would suggest this to Brock, though. I would never put my helmet down in the fourth quarter of a blowout. It would be either on my head or in my hand. Because that's what he didn't have his helmet when they told him go in, and there was confusion, but it did create a funny moment.
Yeah, that was really good.
Troy, before we let you get going, I kind of meant to ask you this a little earlier. As far as back to the running backs real quick. I know you said C.J. Anderson's getting the start. Is Montee Ball getting any work with the first team, or is he basically just working with the second team this week?
Well, the problem with the NFL guys, everything's closed practice. They won't even tell you if the practice squad guy's doing well. So, and the players won't reveal it. It's CIA stuff where it's remarkable. I'm coming from covering Major League Baseball the last 14 years, and everything's out in the open. But football, it's an operative secret mission on everything. So the feeling is, in talking to the guys in the locker room, that Anderson will start, and that you will see probably the third series, in the way they've done it all year, third or fourth series, you're going to see the second running back. That's just how they do it. And again, what the trick is the guy who comes in, like C.J. Anderson came in all of a sudden, 7 yards, 8 yards, 5 yards. He gets to stay in then. They just go to the hot hand. So but the expectation is that C.J. Anderson will start, just based on how he played at Oakland, that he earned it.
Yeah, good problem for Broncos fans to have, a bad problem for fantasy owners of those guys to have. But Troy, we really appreciate you joining us. Everybody, make sure you follow Troy on Twitter. It's at Troy Renck, and it's TroyRenck. Again, Broncos beat writer for the Denver Post. You can follow them as well at Denver Post. Troy, like we said, really appreciate coming on. We'll have to have you on again sometime. This is great.
All right, guys, take care.
He was a no one, a 0-0. Now he's a hunter. He's a hero.
Prime time fantasy football's 0 to hero.
Just like that.
All right, so let's start things off for 0 to hero by recapping last week. Steve and I gave a green on this one because Jason Witten got us 9.3 points, 33 yards and a touchdown. Normally that's probably like a yellow, but he was the 7th best tight end last week. So anytime it's a top 10 like that, tight end positions are kind of basically the only time that ever happens, but gave us the green. So he's on a bye this week, so let's talk about Joe's failure in picking Michael Floyd, who only got 1 catch for 11 yards and 1.1 point.
It's funny. Let me tell you a little bit about this, and I didn't tell you guys this last week. So I started off with my research. I started to put him on a low list. And the more research I did, I just thought, no, I swear. And I thought the more research I did, I said, there's just no way this continues. And he actually had a solid matchup. I said, you know what, forget this. I said, I'm taking him off the low list, and I'm putting in my 0 to hero. He's due any week. And
not this week.
And I ended up I ended up being wrong, apparently. So yes, and that's true. I'm not obviously. I'll take the hit on that. But honestly, when I first started doing prep for the show, he started on my low list, and I just couldn't keep him there. I thought there's just no way it's going to happen again. So it did, and he's not going to be on any good list for me going forward anytime soon. So against Detroit, even though I think that they're going to throw a lot, like I mentioned with Stanton, I just think John Brown may be the beneficiary. I mean, we've seen Fitzgerald getting his catches now, and he's looked good the last few weeks. And I do think that my reason I put John Brown, I think John Brown's going to be the number 2 wide receiver going forward the rest of the season. Not saying that Floyd isn't going to have a good game here or there, but I think if we look at rest of season stats from week 11 through on, I think John Brown's going to be the 2nd most productive receiver in Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, last week I said if you're a Floyd owner, he's going to be okay. I might be changing my tune after that game. And not only is it because he had a bad game, but also because Carson Palmer's not in there. I think Carson Palmer was his best chance to put up good fantasy numbers, and now with him gone for the season, I mean, Michael Floyd could be one of the biggest busts of the fantasy year this season. So I am officially pushing that panic button and trying to find another option at wide receiver if I can. I mean, he's back in that wide receiver 3 range for me at this point.
Well, Adam, let me ask you something. Now, I know in one of the league that the 3 of us are in together, you were really excited at draft night because you made a trade to get Floyd to hopefully use him as a keeper. I mean, At this point, in a lot of leagues, if you're in a non-keeper league, I don't think anybody's going to drop him because you just want him to hit again. But, I mean, he's borderline droppable at this point. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, he is borderline. Just because of the fact that John Brown has come on. I think at this point, wide receivers I'd like to own on Arizona goes Fitzgerald, Brown, Floyd.
Yeah, I agree.
For whatever reason, John Brown seems to have the chemistry with Drew Stanton rather than Michael Floyd, so I would agree with that as well.
Yeah.
Where did he go to college, John Brown?
Brown University.
I have no idea.
Division II, Pittsburgh State in Kansas.
I was going to say Pitt. Oh, never mind, because I was going to say Pitt.
No, Pittsburgh State, right out of Kansas.
Interesting.
MIAA.
Where did Michael Floyd go?
That's the school. Not Pittsburgh State.
Notre Dame, man. You should.
Golden Dahmer.
He was Michael Floyd. He's Notre Dame, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That explains the disappointment. Let's move on to our picks for this week. Week 11, I have a guy that both of you are probably going to disagree with, but I'm taking a shot here this week. Bishop Sankey, playing at home
against... Is this 0 to hero?
This is 0 to hero. Playing at home against Pittsburgh. No, this is not my low list. Playing at home against Pittsburgh under the lights on Monday night. The head coach finally called out somebody else besides Bishop Sankey this week. He called out the offensive line. So I think maybe, just maybe, they decide to perform better for him this week. He's had decent numbers as far as averages go. No touchdowns yet. So I think he gets possibly a touchdown this week. But I think you see his first double-digit game happening this week against Pittsburgh. They're giving up 4.4 yards per attempt. I'm going Bishop Sankey. I think they can actually keep this game relatively close as long as Ben Roethlisberger doesn't throw 6 touchdowns again.
Joe, I'll let you start the firing squad.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and disagree because you're wrong. Steve?
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. This might be the call of the year. If we classify Bishop Sankey as a hero in fantasy football, that might be the call of the year. So
yeah, I agree.
Props to you for taking a shot, but
yeah. I think I have a better shot taking LaDainian Tomlinson this week.
You laugh now. Hey, you laughed. You said something like you'd rather have Tony Gonzalez come back than Michael Rivera, and look what happened.
Yeah, that's another one I was really wrong on. I was hoping you were
You
going
mean the guy that caught a touchdown with 10 seconds left in the game?
Doesn't matter. He still scored more than Tony
Yeah.
Gonzalez.
That's very true.
Steve, what about your guy who actually has a chance to be a hero this week?
Yeah, my hero is AJ Green. They're playing at New Orleans, and sweet baby Jesus, he has to be better than he was last week. And it's because of AJ. It's because of Andy Dalton, not AJ Green, really. But the whole offense has to be better this week. The whole team has to be better this week, and that certainly starts with AJ Green as their X factor. He has been, as long as he's been healthy, and nothing's going to change that. I would look for him to get double-digit targets just to get the offense rolling and get to doing what they know, and that would be giving AJ Green the ball. So I think he gets double-digit targets. I think he turns it into double-digit fantasy points, and I think this game has a chance to have a lot of real-life football points as well. So it could be a shootout, and that's all those things are good for AJ Green. What do you guys think?
I agree. I mean, they're not benching him. I think he gets back to wide receiver 1 status this week. This is a good week to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I like the AJ Green pick against New Orleans. Could be, as long as Andy Dalton is at least proficient, I think it could be an actual shootout. So I like that pick as well. My hero this week, it's tough. He technically wasn't a zero for the last few weeks because he was injured, but I put Rashad Jennings in my hero list. San Francisco is solid against the run, but I do think that Rashad Jennings adds something that Andre Williams couldn't, which was a passing threat. He can receive out of the backfield. An interesting stat I just learned, Rashad Jennings has not played since October 5th, yet he is still the team's leading rusher. So that goes to show you how inefficient or how not good Andre Williams has been. His yards per carry, I think, is under 3, so it's somewhere in the 2s. So I think if the Giants are going to do anything in the run game, it's going to have to be through Rashad Jennings. So he practiced today. He's on pace, and I think he's going to be good. So if you've been patient, you have him on your team, put him in your lineup this week. I'm expecting a good week from him.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Adam.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I mean, it's almost a cheap pick to put him on there, but I'll allow it.
The reason I did is because they're playing San Francisco.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not that San Francisco is an easy matchup. So
yeah,
that's fair.
I mean, that's a crazy stat.
I mean, it's no Bishop Sankey. I get that.
That's a crazy stat that he is still their leading rusher after being out for over a month. They really have missed him on offense, and I think they get him involved immediately, passing, rushing, the whole 9. So especially in a PPR league, a standard league, whatever kind of league you're in, he might even be a good. I don't know what he's at on those weekly fantasy websites. But if he's, in that $5,000-$6,000 range, I'll have to look. But he could be a good value in those leagues.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, he's just set up better for that short pass and a lot of run offense. He's just he's a prime candidate for it.
Okay, so let's move on to Don't Buy the Hype, our results from last week. I had Ryan Tannehill, got 11.2 points, so that gave me the green light. He plays Buffalo on Thursday night, and if you're listening to this, it may be past that game, and you might already know the answer, but I don't like him again this week, short week. Those Thursday night games are just unpredictable, as you see pretty much every week. So how do, Joe, we'll start with you. How do you feel about Tannehill this week against Buffalo?
Yeah, I agree. I think Buffalo's a tough defense, and I think they're going to be able to, one of the benefits of having Tannehill is that he does run a lot, but I think Buffalo's going to be able to hold him and contain him. And you saw last week against a good defense in Detroit, they were really able to bottle him up, and he didn't do much. So I'm kind of expecting a similar performance against Buffalo. And I think I heard today that Buffalo has won 3 straight against Miami. So they just seem to have Miami's number.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that as well. Like you said, pretty much it kind of comes down to me for the Thursday night games being really unpredictable, and you never really know what to expect. So I'm not exactly high on Tannehill this week either. But that said, I wasn't high on Mike Evans last week, and I got that completely wrong. So he ended up with 125 yards and a touchdown. I didn't think he was going to do that. I thought Vincent Jackson would be the guy. But maybe Mike Evans is on the rise, like we said, with other rookie wide receivers. So he plays at Washington this week, who Washington is my suicide pick this week, by the way, guys. So you guys should wish
boy.
me the best of luck.
Oh boy.
But Mike Evans is at Washington. So what do you guys see this week?
That's hard to pick Washington in a suicide pool ever.
I
But
know.
no, I like him. Moving. He's probably not going to have another day like that, but he very well could. I don't see anything preventing him. But I think he's a solid, wide receiver too the rest of the year. I mean, like I said, all these rookies. Benjamin, Evans, even Watkins, we talked about Odell Beckham. They're all doing very well. Brandon Cooks, Jordan Matthews. I mean, I have no problem starting any of them week to week, until like if one of them gets hurt or something. But, solid wide receiver too for me going forward, unless it's a real tough matchup.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that kind of brings us into our next guy for Don't Buy the Hype that I had last week was Allen Hurns. And interesting fact about him that I just read tonight, he's averaging 15.9 average yards per catch, which is actually number one of all the rookie wide receivers this year. So fantasy-wise, I know he's been really hit or miss, but I think his value goes up a little bit with Allen Robinson's injury being out for the year. So I'm not telling you that you need to have Allen Robinson in your starting lineup, but if you're in a league that somebody has dropped him, I think he's a worthy waiver wire pickup just going forward because I think he's going to get a lot more targets with Robinson going down.
I think it, like you said, he's on a bye, but going forward, I actually think it helps Marquise Lee a little bit more. And I mean, Allen Hurns got a concussion against the Cowboys. I don't know. We've seen guys come back the next game. We've seen guys who took like 4 weeks. I think Donald Brown took almost a whole month. So that's something to keep an eye on. But definitely, I think it would help Marquise Lee more. But, Allen Hurns has produced more this year, so I could be wrong there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of a crapshoot at this point. You're not really sure. But I guess, it bumps Hurns into the starting lineup anyway. So it's definitely has possibilities there.
Yeah, so let's go on to this week's pick, and I'll start off with a guy that Joe is gaga over, John Brown. For my Don't Buy the Hype this week against Detroit. This is the first week going back to Drew Stanton. I know you guys said he has some chemistry there. And Stanton could have a decent game. They do have weapons, but, I honestly don't know who it's going to go to. I know they have decent chemistry, but I just think Stanton is a downgrade to every single person. So I can't put him on a high list going from Carson. If I didn't have him on a high list with Carson Palmer, I can't sleep at night knowing that I would put him on a high list with Drew Stanton. So I would stash both him and Brown. We talked about, or both him and Floyd, I should say. We talked about Floyd a little earlier, but I don't think I'm starting either one of them. But I do think Brown in the long term could be good. Like I said, I like him better than Floyd moving forward. And you guys kind of already gave your opinions on him, so I guess we can go right into Steve's pick for this week, unless either of you have anything to add for John Brown.
I don't particularly know. I'm kind of falling in Joe's camp this week.
All right.
Yeah, other than the fact that you're wrong, that's it.
Bishop Sankey and John Brown, Mark.
Oh, God. I have Josh McCown on my Don't Buy the Hype. He was actually the third highest scoring quarterback last week, which was kind of hard to believe. Part of the reason why I was so wrong on Mike Evans. But he's even has a great matchup this week against Washington. But I guess you can consider this my disclaimer to tell you not to overreact on Josh McCown. And I'm telling you right now, you won't be happy if he's your bye week fill-in or Carson Palmer replacement. I just don't think that he has the skills / potential even against somebody like Washington this week. So, what do you guys think?
I don't know, because I think he can give you a decent game, but yeah, nothing like last week. Maybe he can get you 17. I say this a lot, but I feel like he might be able to get you like a 17, 18 point game. But it is a good matchup, like you said. I mean, I'd take him over Stanton, guys like that for sure, but I'd probably still take Sanchez over I'd definitely still take Sanchez over McCown. So yeah, he's not in my QB1 range at all, so I could definitely see him going, Don't Buy the Hype. I could see you getting a green on that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I bet you, I think going forward, I'd be surprised if he's in the top 5 in scoring at all the rest of the year. So, I mean, I think he's just one of those guys that, he could be a third, like you said, he was third last week, and then this week he may be the 17th or 18th. He's just not someone you can trust, especially for the team he plays for. So I like that pick that you had there. So And then I went with a guy that this may come back to bite me, but it wouldn't be the first time. I'm going to go with C.J. Anderson against St. Louis. Even after speaking with Troy Rink tonight, I just think that it is a revolving door, as you said, Adam, earlier. And I think that he will get the first chance this week. But I think with Monty Ball coming back, I just don't see that type of performance that he put up last week. And again, you do have to remember who they were playing. They were playing Oakland. So would it surprise me if C.J. Anderson gets a touchdown and maybe 50 yards, which would give him 11 points, which technically I'd be wrong on. I get that. But that wouldn't surprise me. But I don't think you're going to see him run for over 100 yards again and score a touchdown. So I think with Ball coming back and going forward into your fantasy football playoffs, I just don't know which running back you're going to want out of this backfield. Now, with all that being said, I think he's still probably the hottest waiver wire pickup this week because of all the running back issues this year. But I think if you go in this week expecting him to be a top 12 guy, I think you're going to be mistaken. Adam.
I'm going to disagree because, like Troy had said, he is expected to get the start. And I know that he said they're going to go with the hot hand, but I think that hot hand is going to end up being C.J. Anderson. I don't know how much I'm buying into the whole Monte Ball losing 12 pounds and looking faster and whatnot. I have to see it first. So at least for this week, I'm okay with C.J. Anderson. So I'm going to disagree this week. Possibly next week, I think you could see Monte Ball work into a little bit more and possibly get more carries and everything like that. Plus, C.J. Anderson is a guy who can get involved in the passing game as well, so that helps his value.
Yeah, I think I'm on Adam's side here this week, just for this week, just to see what happens. And pretty much for all the reasons that Adam said, I just think that C.J. Anderson's going to get the first crack, so he essentially controls his own destiny in a way. So if he plays well to start, then he continues to play well. So I think he's got a chance to put up some more numbers this week.
Yeah, maybe Steve and I are learning our lesson from going against Ronnie Hillman all those weeks that we kept doing. So
or any Bronco ever.
Yeah, that's right. Steve did say last week he's never picking against the Bronco again. So there you go. All right, let's finish up with something I think we did like a over under owned thing before, but these are guys we're going to tell you who are over 50% owned and are droppable. Steve, I'll let you start off with a couple of guys you threw on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. I have Andre Williams on the list, who is 50. These are all Yahoo numbers, by the way. He's currently 53% owned. I kind of said this last week, and Joe said it tonight. This guy's time is completely done. You can go ahead and move on. It's the Jennings show at this point. We'll also give a quick guy who maybe you should pick up instead, and I actually have C.J. Anderson on that list. So he was his numbers were low. They might be over 50% now, but if you can get C.J. Anderson, go ahead and get him. My second guy is Brandon Oliver, another guy who's 53% owned in leagues. With Ryan Matthews back, I think that he is the lead back. It's his job to lose, and I don't think he's going to lose it. I think you can just I would classify Oliver as a handcuff right now, and I think you can find a better handcuff at this point, and that handcuff for me would be Carlos Hyde out in San Francisco. I think they're going to give him more carries as the season wears on to keep Gore fresh. They still think they can make the playoffs, so they're going to want Gore for that run. And then the other guy is Wes Welker, who, again, we talked to Troy about in our interview. He's just not consistent enough. He's always hurt. He hasn't gone over 10 fantasy points this year once. He's their third down guy, but that doesn't mean anything for you because you don't get extra points for. Yeah, he's a lefty specialist. You don't get any extra points for third down conversions. I think he's just on rosters because his name's Wes Welker at this point. And the pickup, I think you go with Jordan Matthews. He got hot last week, and I think that maybe Sanchez likes Jordan Matthews a little bit. So I think that you might be able to find a diamond in the rough there, another rookie wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you got?
I agree with all of those. And I think, actually, C.J. Anderson is at 58 now, and actually Jordan Matthews has moved up to 56. If you can still get those guys, pick them up for sure, because obviously they're on the rise. I threw a couple names on here as well. I got Marcus Colston, and you might be leery to drop him because it's Marcus Colston and because he's on a Drew Brees team.
I thought about that.
Yeah, he's 76% owned. Again, this is Yahoo. Guess how many games he's had in double figures in standard leagues this year? He has had one game. I just think it's Brandon Cooks as the number one wide receiver now. And I just don't think there's a week you can trust Marcus Colston. There's guys I'd rather pick up and have on my team, like, for instance, Davante Adams, who is only about 19% owned. We talked about Adams a little bit earlier. I think all three of us like him going forward a little bit more than Marcus Colston, especially if you're in some kind of keeper or dynasty league. The next guy I have is Ruben Randle. He's about 79% owned. Guess how many games he's had this year in double figures for standard leagues? 0. So obviously Odell Beckham.
That's shocking to me.
Yeah, Odell Beckham has come on as the guy to own on that team. So if Ruben didn't do it before Odell, and you've seen he hasn't been able to do it since Odell, I think he's droppable for sure. And there's a guy I'd rather have, Justin Hunter, who's at about 46. You didn't see him have a great game last week, but he did play, I think, like 90 some odd percentage of the snaps, and that's what I look for. And I think it might just take a little bit of time to get on the same page as Mettenberger. I mean, he's new to the system, so I think Hunter's on the field, so he's gonna get looks, he's gonna get targets, he's probably gonna get some catches. I just think I'd rather have him over Ruben Randle at this point because there's more upside there moving forward. I'm not saying you should start him or Davante Adams, and I'm sure Steve's not saying you should necessarily throw Hyde or Matthews right into your lineup. Obviously, this week you're probably starting Anderson, but Matthews probably even could be a guy to start this week. But these are guys that have better upside than the other guys we're telling you to drop. And speaking of guys to drop, Hal Doug Martin is 50% owned. Maybe it's down now after waivers have gone through, but Doug Martin was still at the 50% line when I looked last night. He's the third guy on the team, okay? Pick up Charles Sims. He's 30% owned. He's potentially the number one guy on the team. I think they kind of eased him back. He got 10 touches. He did fumble last week. They were going to ease him back for like 6 to 8, I think we were hearing reports. He got 10, so that's just his first week back. I think you see him get more than 10 touches this week, and I think that just increases moving forward. Joe, anything to add about Colston, Randall, Martin, Adams, Hunter, or Sims? Or the other 6 guys that Steve had talked about, because I don't think you gave your opinion.
No, I agree with every single one you gave, and the only one I would add to the list, I didn't send it to you guys, and we kind of just alluded to it a few minutes ago, is I think Michael Floyd may really be someone that you can drop. I think if you're keeping him on your roster right now, you may be just waiting for him to play and waiting for him to do something, and you're starting him week after week, getting nothing out of him. Whereas I like a lot of these other guys, Davante Adams and some of these other wide receivers you've talked about, Jordan Matthews and even John Brown, at this point that I trust more than him. But I think you guys listed some really good guys, and I love the Charles Sims pickup. Everything I've read about him, and I don't know, maybe it's just hype, but all of the beat writers in Tampa Bay love him, the coaches love him, and I think it's only a matter of time before he starts getting a lot more carries. I think last week he had 8 or 10 carries and put up 4 points or something like that. But I think each week we're going to see a lot more of him.
Steve, do you have anything to add about the other 6 guys that I threw on the list?
No, I didn't know that Doug Martin was still 50% owned, so that's a good pick.
Like I said, it might be down now once waivers have gone through, but if it's not, you shouldn't have him on your team.
Yeah, and the stats you gave on Ruben Randle and Colston are good ones too. So just don't go by name, go by stats.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, that wraps it up for the Week 11 edition of Primetime Fantasy Football. We'd like to thank again Troy Rink, from the Denver Post for coming on for us. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Troy Rink. It's Renck is how you spell his last name, by the way. He's followed by people such as Jason Stark, Eric Carabell, and several others. So good follow. Make sure you get.
Used to be a Rockies beat writer as well, so he's in the baseball and football world.
Yeah, as you could kind of tell from a few baseball references in the interview with him.
Yeah.
So make sure you check all of us out on Twitter. I will be at AdamNextLevel. Steve is at SRichards31. And Joe is at JoeyWebb32. And actually, before we go, I forgot we do have a Twitter question, and I forgot to mention this. Wes Koenig wants to know at Dub Snipes. He sent us a few questions, so get on that train, guys. We answer the questions. Here's a trade for you. He wants to know Keenan Allen and Rashad Jennings for Dez Bryant and Joique Bell. He has Gio, Charles, and West as his other RBs, Floyd, Cooks as his other wide receivers. Joe, well, let's get your opinion on that trade.
It sounds like he could definitely use some help with the wide receiver. Who would you say his running backs are currently right now?
Gio, Charles, West, and he has Jennings. but he would be giving up Jennings and getting Bell.
Yeah, I think that I would do that. He's already got some really strong running backs, and to be able to pick up Dez to put him in your lineup, you're losing Jennings, who of course I'm high on, but I think he's got enough there already. So you got enough running backs. Trade it for a top wide receiver like Dez. Go for that.
Steve?
Yeah, this is a no-brainer for me. You're giving up 2 non-stars to get a star, and you don't need a running back,
Right.
which is the star, not the star that you're getting. You probably won't use Joique Bell, but if that's who the guy wants to throw in, then take it, but take Dez Bryant and run with it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you're looking at right now, you're starting, I mean, if you have a flex, you're probably starting Gio, Charles, Jennings, but your 2 wide receivers are Floyd and Cooks. Now you do this trade, you got probably Cooks and Dez, plus Gio, Charles, and probably West or Bell. Probably West, the way he's been getting carries. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, you essentially got to look at you're taking out Floyd at this point. Or sorry, you probably had Keenan Allen and Cooks at your wide receiver. So you're taking out Keenan Allen for Dez. And, I mean, you're taking out Rashad Jennings for probably, I don't know, who
Terrence West.
Terrence West, yeah, Terrence West or Joique Bell, but most likely Terrence West. So I think West and Dez are just better than having Allen and Jennings.
Absolutely.
In the lineup. So that's all 3 of us saying yes, go for it. So pull that trigger. Anyway, so back to wrapping the show up. Sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. Check us out, nextlevelradioonline.com. Subscribe on iTunes. Just search for Primetime Fantasy Football. Make sure you also check out Next Level Radio on iTunes for the showcast, as well as guest spotlights. Twitter at NXT Level Radio. Tweet us. Email us your questions. Primetime at nextlevelradioonline.com. Check Steve's blog out, StephenRichards.net. I think that wraps it up. Steve, anything else to add before we get going for week number 11?
Nope. Have fun and good luck.
Joe, anything else to add?
No, good luck, guys.
Awesome. Okay, so we will see you next week for week number 12. Like I said, make sure you check us out. Tell your friends, even if they're fantasy football fanatics like we are and like you are. Spread the word. We'll see you in week number 12.